That's why the Clippers are my choice to make it to the NBA Finals out of the West.
When it comes to playoff disappointment, the Clippers are in a league of their own. Their new stars couldn't change their history of falling short of postseason expectations. Here are what we all missed about the Clippers in the NBA. By the way, make sure to click that subscribe button to stay up to date with all of our engaging videos, and use that trigger finger by smashing that like button. Now, let's get into it. When the Clippers signed Kawhi Leonard and traded for Paul George, the audience was quick to label the team as title favorites. Even when the regular season concluded, they ended up with the second-best record in the Western Conference. This only solidified the faith everyone had in the team. However, the playoffs didn't pan out as expected. Despite having two of the best wing defenders at their disposal, the Clippers failed to put up with even the underdog teams like the Denver Nuggets. What's worse is they tanked a commanding 3-1 lead and were sent packing in the conference semifinals. The aftermath of this was horrific. Kawhi and Doc Rivers were the target of a lot of scrutiny. Although this was unfair because the team itself failed to support its star. Paul George's inability to step up made everyone question his status as a star player too. Bench players like Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell occasionally gave above-par performances, but that just wasn't enough. With Rivers fired, did the Clippers have a chance at redemption? Well, after a very disappointing ending to the Clippers' playoff run, many are wondering what they should do. Some people have suggested trading away key pieces like Paul George and Lou Williams, or breaking up the team completely and starting from scratch. Let's look at some reasons why some people want the team to break up. 1. Superstars underperforming. Kawhi Leonard, prior to this most recent playoff defeat, had a reputation for coming through when his teammates needed him the most in the playoffs. Leonard, like many of his teammates, folded like a cheap chair. Leonard during his recent playoff run averaged about 28 points, along with 9 rebounds per game. In a Game 7 against the Nuggets, with the season on the line, Leonard scored a total of 14 points on an atrocious 6 for 22 shooting. Not only did he shoot horribly, he only scored 1 field in the second half and didn't record a single basket in the fourth quarter. The amount of Paul George slander that came up as a result of that series versus the Nuggets was uncanny, and rightfully so. Many people prior to this series claimed George was a superstar, but this is no longer the case in most fans' perspectives. Paul George had an underwhelming playoff as a whole. In a Game 7 with the season on the line, George shot an egregious 4 for 16 from the field and 2 for 11 from the three-point line. This horrific shooting display equated to a total of 10 points for Pandemic P. Very similar to his teammate Kawhi Leonard, Paul George also had 1 field goal made in the second half of his game. Lou Williams, who also had a reputation for coming through in the clutch, now has that reputation tarnished. Williams in that Game 7 against the Nuggets missed some point-blank layups. Williams added to that illustrious brick house that the Clippers were bent on building by shooting 3 for 11 from the field and scoring 7 points. Since the season started, everyone was looking forward to an LA versus LA Western Conference Finals. Literally everyone. For 8 long years, when LeBron James was in the Eastern Conference, we knew who was going to end up in the finals year after year after year, for 8 years. Then Kevin Durant goes to the Warriors, and yet again, we were in for a predictable playoff layout. Last year was different. Last year we had that glorious parity, and we were going to get that epic Western Conference matchup that we all deserved. Unfortunately, the Clippers had other plans. For the first time in a long time, the teams that would represent each conference wasn't obvious. 2. The Clippers flat out are not that likable. Outside of soft-spoken Kawhi Leonard, it is not very hard to see why a lot of people want to see the Clippers fail. Patrick Beverley is well known for his antics and trash-talking, and he often speaks out about players that are better than him. Plain and simple, he's annoying. He's one of those players that you love to have on your team, but you strongly dislike him when he's not on your side. Montrezl Harrell also has his moments when it comes to lack of likability. During the first round of the playoffs, Harrell had an explicit way of describing Luka Doncic. Some people were offended by this, pointing out the fact that if the roles were reversed, Doncic would be facing much more of a severe penalty. Harrell even mentioned how he received death threats for the comments he made. Harrell has since apologized, and him and Doncic seem to be on good terms. Marcus Morris is another player that comes off as thinking he is better than what he is. There's been a plethora of moments that make you question how anyone can tolerate him. Morris at times seems like he's angry for no reason, and has been overly physical when the situation didn't call for it. Paul George has also had his fair share of unlikable moments. He had a petty back and forth with Damian Lillard on Instagram, which most believe was uncalled for. George going into that Game 7 talked about how they were in the driver's seat. a bold statement for someone who severely underperformed all playoffs long. It turns out that George isn't all that well liked within his own locker room. There were reports of Paul George trying to rally his teammates after a deflating loss, and that speech was met with eye rolls. There were also reports that Doc Rivers gave George too much preferential treatment, and that some players within the locker room felt as though they were equal to or better than George's talent. 3. They did not want to be there in the first place. At a certain point, the NBA playoffs was being boycotted by the players. The two teams that were adamantly against the playoffs returning were the Clippers and the Lakers. These teams were so against returning to play that they walked out of the meeting that discussed whether or not the teams should return. No excuses, but clearly the mindset for winning the championship was not there for the Clippers. In every single clinching game against the Nuggets, the Clippers had a double-digit lead. Even with a lackadaisical mindset, the Clippers were one win away from going to the Western Conference Finals. Think about that. It only takes one season for everyone to forget your mishaps. If unfocused gets you within one game of the Western Conference Finals, just imagine what a focused mindset could do. 4. All in all, it was a weird season. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that this season was a hard one to adjust to. Randomly, the season is shut down. Players are skeptical to return amidst social injustice, so the shutdown lasts for months. We finally get basketball back. Then the players boycott during the first round of the playoffs. Then we get basketball back shortly after. During this weird bubble season, there were no fans, no traveling, and for the most part, most teams played in the same arena on the nightly basis. Some people view some of these things as an advantage, but either way, this season was a big adjustment. No one in NBA history had to go through these obstacles. The bubbles provided a whole new atmosphere that the players weren't used to. The Clippers did okay for a team that didn't want to be there in the first place, adjusting to this new normal. It wouldn't be fair to break up a team based off such a weird season. Now, if next season ends this way for the Clippers, people will be unforgiving with the Clippers' ridicule. It would be fair to say that next season is championship or bust for them. The Clippers should have beaten the Nuggets, but they still have the power to rewrite their history. NBA fans are notorious for their recency bias. All it takes is one finals appearance to change the narrative. What can you say about the Clippers? Let us know in the comments section below. And hey, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so we can continue giving you the best content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.